In one of my videos, I said this: if this 4070 idea takes root, there will be consequences, and it won't be our favorite tech personalities who have to suffer them. At the time, that was pretty vague, but it did take hold, and there have been consequences. The immediate one we've seen now that the 4080 12GB is canceled. Everyone is tending to see this as a big win for the consumer, but I don't think it is, even in the short term. We're going to have to wait at least 2 months for an RTX 4000 GPU that's listed under $1,000, and I think there's more coming. In the 1980s, Coca-Cola was getting slapped around by other soft drinks, especially losing out in taste tests to Pepsi. So they went into the lab and reformulated. Their new flavor dominated taste tests, even beating the original formula. So in 1985, they launched New Coke. It was a complete disaster. Customers revolted, and after just 3 months, Coca-Cola returned the original formula to market, labeled as classic, to great success. This is a cautionary tale for businesses. You have to understand what your customer actually wants from your product. As the story is told, the word at the center of the marketing plan at Coke was taste. After this hiccup, they changed it to tradition. Another story is of a company that sold cheap locks in South Asia. They were so flimsy that the key wasn't even necessary. You could just pry it open with your fingers. Well, an engineer at the company came up with an essentially free way to make the lock secure. The company implemented it and was even able to beat its competitors on price. Sales disappeared seemingly overnight. What they discovered was that the locks were actually just a formality. It was a trustworthy community, so when someone saw a lock, they left it alone. People would send family members to get things, and they never needed a key. The secure lock actually complicated things so much that people wouldn't even buy them. These customers weren't actually looking for security, they were looking for a signaling device. So what does this have to do with graphics cards in 2022? This summer, if I were on Nvidia's strategy team, our understanding of the market would be centered around the belief that the customers have already decided that they're in the market and will purchase a GPU. And what they want from their vendor, from us, is advancement in our performance. They want us to engineer better products that give them better results. And if we do, they will buy it. That phrase, advancement in our performance, would be on a big sign in our conference room. But now I'd look at all the backlash around the 4080 12GB, the people angry because it should have been a 4070 or even a 4060 with the associated reduction in price, the gleeful reaction when it was unlaunched, and the clear belief that this is a huge win. Considering these reactions, I would be forced to reevaluate, because we provided a better performing, more advanced product, and the price to performance ratio is better than our current product stack. The comparable product, the 3090 Ti, released earlier this year for more than twice the price and lacks all the new features available on this card. This all makes sense, so why do they hate it? What I would eventually be forced to think is that we have it all wrong. The consumer doesn't actually want advancement in performance. It's the same mistake Coke made when they went all in on flavor, mistakenly believing this was the way to win customers. No, GPU customers feel this has been a joint effort between gamers and the GPU companies to bring the industry where it is today. We, that is, the hypothetical me on the Nvidia team, contributed by initially creating the entire concept of graphics cards, then pushing the envelope of semiconductor engineering for 30 years to advance the universe of gaming. They contributed by buying cards and playing games and complaining. And because they were such an equal partner in the whole enterprise, they want a share of the company's effort. What do I mean? Look, this whole thing proves that gamers don't actually want just better performance, and I say that for a couple of reasons. The main one is this: if you listen to all the criticisms, they boil down to one thing. The 8100 die is enormous. It can contain over 18,000 cores, and because that's public knowledge, that max capacity is the baseline for comparison. Think about it.
What this chart shows us is the relative CUDA core count of various Nvidia GPUs from the current and past generations relative to the top tier consumer die. The 4080 is sitting around the low 50% mark, in line with what X70 class cards sit at. So I was wrong. Previously I called the 4080 12GB an X70 class card, which is incorrect. The 4080 12GB is more of an X60 Ti class card.
That is bonkers, like actually nuts. Imagine, if you will, a baker. She happens to be your aunt. Every year, she bakes a half sheet cake and brings it to Thanksgiving dinner. When it's time for dessert, she gives it to the kids and you divide it amongst yourselves. Then, one year, she decides to make a full sheet cake for whatever reason. But when dessert comes around, she only puts half the cake on the table. It's the same size as usual, it's just that you know there's more cake in the kitchen. Do you say thanks and dig in? No, you are indignant!
Now we are indignant!
This is only half a cake. How dare she try to scam you like this? Yeah, That's what all this whining sounds like. What if Ada Lovelace had a max core count of say 12,500 and they released the same two 4080s? Everyone would have been fine. There would have been no talking about how the 12 gig was obviously 60 tier because it had half the cores of the 4090, or about die names because it would have been a 102. Okay, everyone wouldn't have been fine. There would have still been a reasonable conversation about how confusing the naming scheme was, but most would agree with me that it was a 4080 and 4080 Ti and wonder why they didn't just say that in the first place. But in general, there would have been none of this self-righteous anger. Don't believe me? Check out the response to AMD's announcement. They had what can only be described as a super vague and ultimately disappointing product unveiling in which they showed that even they don't believe they can compete with the 4090. They're just gunning for the 4080, hoping people still don't care about ray tracing.
The world's fastest gaming card under $1,000.
And their prices are still super high. And how did everyone react? Was there immediate anger at them calling something a 7900 that so clearly should have been a 7800? I mean, the 6800 was meant to compete with the 3080, right? Shouldn't the 4080 competitor be called a 7800? And that aside, if the XTX is meant to compete with the 4080 16 gig, what is the XT meant to compete with? Oh, right, probably the 4080 12 gig, which was also set to launch for $899. So how did they get away with it? It's because as far as we know, the maximum size of their GCD, the graphics complex die, the actual GPU, is 300 square millimeters. So even though it's only a 20% increase in cores, 5% for the XT, it's accepted as a flagship and with a flagship price. AMD is still the beloved underdog because even though they developed something with less potential, they aren't holding any of that potential back. They're putting it all out there for the same flagship price. They're giving the consumer a share of their effort. Nvidia, on the other hand, is being punished for giving us a half a cake. So what does it all mean? What are the consequences I mentioned? Well, the first and most obvious is that there's only one next generation card coming to market under $1,000. Yes, 900 is a lot, but it's more accessible than 1000 or 1200. But let's go back to the conference room. Now that we've realized our new reality, we have to change the sign, right? So now it reads share of our effort. What adjustments do we make? Well, we could do the normal corporate thing and have giant meetings with stakeholders and check in with reviewers and do consumer surveys. And we'll probably do all that because otherwise they might realize they don't actually need all of us. But in the end, a simple and cost-effective solution will present itself. We would simply stop working so hard. If the public is going to get mad, then we'll go back to baking a smaller cake. It's cheaper, it's easier, and it allows us to focus on other aspects of the business. The downside is that we'll make fewer breakthroughs, offer fewer new features, and the pace of advancement in the industry will slow way down. But we probably won't have to drop prices. As long as the new cards represent a price to performance improvement over the last generation, and everyone knows we're giving them all we've got, we'll still be able to convince people to buy them. This is what happened with gaming consoles. Did you know that on some alternate timeline, essentially every console game has integrated voice commands? You can lean to dodge in shooters.
Zoom in, and I can peek around corners if I want to.
And you can sell your used digital games. Yep. Of course, in this timeline, consumers ruined it by being short-sighted fools who hate change. Let's talk about the Xbox One reveal disaster. Full disclosure, when it comes to consoles, I'm an Xbox stan. I just think it has superior hardware and software, and DualShock controllers suck. In 2013, Microsoft announced the Xbox One and it went poorly. The Xbox One was an ambitious entertainment hub that was also a very powerful game console, and it was designed for the future of streaming and digital content. Unfortunately, gamers were stuck in the past. Microsoft added 3 things to the Xbox One that ultimately sank it. First, a user would be required to connect to the internet once every 24 hours. Second, you wouldn't be able to sell disc-based games. They would install media like on a PC, and you'd need a license to play. Third, a Kinect was part of the package. Well, the people revolted, and Microsoft relented and reversed each of the 3. Gamers won! And as a result, we all lost. I find this story so frustrating. Just think about what it cost us. Because they were so used to the ability to give a game disc to a friend to borrow, they gave up the ability to create a digital sharing library for up to 10 friends, just like on Steam. Except one of them could be playing the game you're playing at the same time. And because they just loved hitting GameStop to save $5 on a used game, they gave up the ability to trade in and resell used digital games. Initially, that feature was through a middleman, but where would we be now? And the Kinect. I'm probably alone in this. Well, me and fans of Ubisoft's Just Dance. But that's okay. The Kinect is a remarkable piece of hardware with a ton of potential. I won't go into all its features and capabilities, but the first version was used for surgical training, and Microsoft was working on a project that would have let you control a computer like Tony Stark. Imagine what Activision or Gearbox or even Valve could have come up with if they knew there would be a Kinect on every console for a 7 or 8 year cycle. Or don't, because that future's gone. We might be on the edge of that same kind of loss now. With everyone constantly belittling DLSS 3 frame generation as fake frames, Nvidia may abandon the project before it's matured. There must be something there since AMD is pursuing it as well. I'm not saying you have to buy these cards at these prices. Right now, I'm not even concerned of whether it's a good product or not. I'm saying if we convince them that instead of new ideas, what we actually want is just pure performance and the knowledge they're giving us their absolute best, we may never find out what's possible. We narrowly avoided that fate for ray tracing. At the time, it was pointless, expensive, and no developers had even implemented it yet. But fortunately, the community at large waited to see how things shook out. Who knows what innovation Nvidia or AMD and Intel will come up with next? Will we reject it out of hand because it isn't what we thought we wanted? Or will we let the people who drive the industry show us the future that they can create? A lot of people, maybe most even, disagree with me about my Xbox analysis. I've been arguing with them for 9 years and none has convinced me. Feel free to try in the comments, and thanks for watching.